This is Chuck Liddell. It is the 28th of June, 2023, 2 o'clock approximately. We're here in the library. I'm doing my bi-monthly program of a Q&A. I guess they say, Catalina, everything you want to know. I usually put in everything you want to know about Catalina, but we're afraid to ask. So this is your opportunity to ask me questions. But generally the format, and we'll try to keep to it, I'm going to have kind of a theme. So I'm going to be talking of a couple of things that I find to be very unusual about the island. That hopefully, the reason we're doing this is because I tell things that most people don't know. And I may never have a chance to put it in a history book, which is what I want to do. I want to go after the obscure ones, which is what I talk about. So if I don't make it, we're 76 now. Well, you're 75.
No, you're much older than I am.
I know, okay, 75, 76. So in case I croak before I can get it all down, we're doing these recordings. So that way for posterity, I'll be able to know that at least I was able to get it. So anyway, I'm gonna give you 3 interesting stories, at least in fact, you brought up one of them, but I'll try to do them in chronological order. So the first thing had to do was the fact that the Bannings brothers, as you may know, were here before Mr. Wrigley. They were here from 1891 to 1919 when Mr. Wrigley basically bought him out. But there was somebody before him, and that was George Chateau. Now, George Chateau took over the island in 1887 because of the fact that the Santa Fe Railroad, for the first time, connected Chicago with the sleepy little Mexican village we now call Los Angeles. So he knew that people, once they got to Los Angeles, were going to want to come to Catalina because of our renowned fishing, and also because they thought that salt water was therapeutic. So, of course, being an island, we have plenty of salt water for that. So George Chateau, besides building the giant Metropole Hotel, which burned down in the 1915 fire, I'm not going to talk about that, but it did burn down. It went from Whitley to Marilla. He wanted money to make investments on the mainland. He was not really committed to Catalina except what money he could make, and he was in buying investments on the mainland. So a conglomerate from London contacted him and said, if you give us the mineral rights to the island, because at that time they had found a little bit of gold. Of course, you find that pretty much everywhere, but they found what they thought was enough gold that they wanted to take over all the mineral rights of Catalina. Okay, so they said, we will then pay the Lick estate. Now the Licks were here before George Chateau, and they were primarily into sheep herding. Well, he had died, but they had a trust set up, and it was being paid to a school up in San Francisco. That they were paying off the money that he owed the Lick estate for buying Catalina Island for $150,000. So this conglomerate said, if you give us the mineral rights to the island, we will then pay off your debt to the Lick estate. Okay, fine. Well, the Lick people were not happy about this. They didn't like the idea that there was now a conglomerate from London that was paying them off. So they went to the Bannings brothers and said, we would like you, because they had the Wilmington Transportation Company at that time, which was started back in the 1880s, even before Avalon became a town. They were bringing people over, campers and people just to come to the island. So the Lick people said, we would like you to take over the island. So the Bannings put their heads together. There were 3 Banning brothers, Joseph, Hancock, and William. So they got together and they came up with a scheme. So they had a secretary. They sent him to London. And while he was in London, he met up with a friend of the Bannings who had a newspaper. It was kind of a economic newspaper reporting on the money, the events of the day connected with money. So the secretary went to this gentleman and said, I want to put in a column in your newspaper. It was a false column. It said that the island company had just been purchased by another group. Okay, so when the gold or the mineral people in London saw that, they said, well, it's over. I mean, we're not going to pay any more money to the Lick people. We dissolved. Now, in London at that time, if you missed a board meeting, you automatically dissolved as a corporation. So the corporation no longer existed. Okay, but the Bannings continued to pay the money to the Lick Foundation. So when they finally paid it off in 1891, the Bannings very nicely went to George Chateau and said, you might be interested in knowing we now own the island because we paid off your debt. So I found that to be a little. Now I know the great grandson of Hancock Banning, and when I told him this, he told his mother, and she was furious with me to get that story out. And so I saw her and I said, is it true? She said, well, yes, but we don't want people to know about it. And I said, well, that's just the fun part of history. Things are not the way they always seem to be. Okay, in chronological order, and he brought up the fact of the parallel pair. The businesses here, they were called the freeholders, wanted to have this as an open port. They wanted to allow anybody that wanted to come over to bring people over on boats. Now at that time we had a steamer pier, but what they would do is they would dock off of in the water and then bring people in rowboats primarily because the Bannings wouldn't allow them to use the steamer pier. That's where Blue Water now is where the steamer pier where we used to dive for coins, right?
That's right.
That's right. Okay, so anyway.
Did you dive for coins as well?
Oh, yes.
Oh, of course. How do you think we made our money?
Oh, yes. Of course.
You were never considered an islander unless you dove for coins.
Everyone of a certain age dove for coins for quite a while.
How deep did you dive? And I'm sorry to have shanghaied this, but I'm curious. How deep when you dove?
I think it's about 40 feet if you want.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you couldn't get the coin before it hit the
Which
bottom,
is what you wanted to do. You did not want to go to the bottom.
You wanted to get it as it was sinking.
You wanted to get it as you're flipping down. You had to get really
Gotcha.
down, so you didn't have to go very deep.
Good. Sorry to
Oh,
interrupt.
it's okay.
Well, no, in fact, we could have a whole lecture on diving for coins.
Yes.
So hopefully you could come in for that. That would be, I think you would find that to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, getting back to this. So the freeholders represented the businesses in town, and they wanted to have an open port. They wanted everybody to come over. The Bannings only wanted to have their boats, the Wilmington. So when people see a WTC, they think that means Wrigley. It doesn't. It's Wilmington. It's Wilmington Transportation Company. So they wanted to have a closed port, which meant that everybody could only come over on their boats. So what they did is they built a parallel pier. And the parallel pier went out about 150 feet. It's approximately where the Blue Water now is. It went from the steamer pier. And if you go over to what's the name of that shirt place?
Well, all the way to the road, almost by the trailhead. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but again, I
You're
can't.
talking about Yoshi's?
No, the one on the corner.
Oh,
Okay, well, anyway, so if you see that ramp, if you go
okay.
to the end, you will see a ramp. That is where the glass bottom boats used to come up when they built the parallel pier. So that, and then you see that wall.
And there used to actually be a beach there.
Right, but that wall, yeah, before they built the moles, but that's another story. So that wall that you see there was part of the parallel pier, so you see how far it went. So, island threads. Island threads is what I'm talking about, so it's pretty much.
When you said the ramps, I knew where they were.
Yeah. So anyway, the people or the businesses of Avalon, the freeholders, were very upset with this because they wanted to have as many people come as possible. They didn't like the way that the Bannings were restricting it, so they took them to court. Now the parallel pier went up in 1906. It started in 1906, was finished in 1907. They took them to court. The court stood up for the people of Avalon, for the freeholders, and so the Bannings lost the parallel pier. So what they did is they took it down. So in other words, all the boats had to come to the parallel pier to be able to be processed. That's the reason why they did that. So if a boat came in, they couldn't get past the parallel pier.
They didn't want anybody to be able to land on the beach.
Right, exactly. Which that's what they would have done if there wouldn't been. Okay, so anyway, they took them to court, the Bannings lost. So they took the planks from the parallel pier, built the pleasure pier, which is what we have now in 1909. So I always call this as the first defiance of the island, of the people of Avalon against the Banning brothers.
For the next 50 years, you had two piers in the bay.
What?
For the next 50 years, you had two piers in the bay.
Right. Until I think it was
steamer pier and the pleasure pier.
I think it was 1966 that they started taking down the steamer pier.
After the season of '66. Yeah.
So that was called the steamer pier because that's where the steamers would come in. The pleasure pier was called the pleasure pier because this is where they had the rental boats for fishing and just to take out boats to rent. And so this was the pleasure type of things. They also had the glass bottom boats would come here as they do now.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. So anyway, I'm trying to stay on track.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so anyway,
Thank you for calling.
so that's how the steamer pier came. Okay, the next big
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
confrontation between Avalon and the Island Company, which was established in 1892 by the Bannings,
Better bring it by.
was
I'm not sure what he
they
needs.
decided they wanted to become incorporated
Please, if you can. All right.
in 1913. Now, I'm going to say this on the recording, and I want everyone to hear this.
Great.
If you
Yes,
find
I
a
can't
shirt
say
that
for
they
sure
sell
what
in
you
town
need,
that said that Catalina Island was incorporated in 1913, don't buy it and tell the owner of the store they are completely wrong. What happened in 1913 was the incorporation of Avalon. Has nothing to do with Catalina Island. Catalina Island became Catalina Island in 1602. So it has nothing to do with Catalina. So don't buy it and tell the owner, get rid of the shirts because it just throws everybody off. Okay, so they decided to be incorporated. The Bannings were very upset about this because they owned approximately 80% of the town in that time in 1912, 1913. So they were very upset about this. Well, they went ahead and we became incorporated. Now, up to that time, the Bannings, this was a company town. The Bannings would pay for all. You basically had a free you were basically free to live here. They picked up all your expenses
Totally under
with the
their rules.
idea you didn't bug them.
Yeah, totally.
In other
under
words,
their
you just kept, your nose clean. They'll take care of you. Don't worry. We'll take care of you. Just let it. Yeah, just keep your mouth shut. Of course, that thing with the pier didn't go very well with them. So, in 1913, we became incorporated. Okay. Now, by the way, you may be interested in knowing our power plant was right over on Metropole, about where you see that parking lot there. That is where the original,
behind the school.
yeah, from 1903 until it was still up in the 30s.
There's a piece of that story that I seem to recall that had to do with the freeholders wanting to have liquor sales on the island.
Okay, that's, you're jumping a little ahead.
Jumping ahead. Well,
No.
I thought that had to do with incorporation.
Okay, what happened was, the Bannings were very much prohibitionists. They did not believe in alcohol. Okay, so the first thing that the city did in order to bring in revenues was to bring in allowing liquor stores to come into Avalon and then taxing them. In fact, I don't know if you knew this, but they were even taxing divers diving for coins. We were supposed to pay the city $90 a year to have the privilege to do it. So I owe the city a lot of money, so I'll write them a check.
Jeez, I'm sorry to hear that. I owe them a lot too.
So anyway, the point is, that was the slap in the face of the Bannings, because they were definitely prohibitionists, especially William Banning. So, excuse me.
You have about, yes.
Okay, well,
I'll get it for you. You've got about 4 minutes on the day.
I'll keep trying to talk. So, that was a slap in the face to the prohibitionists of Bannings by allowing liquor stores to come in. Okay.
Which only lasts for a few years because prohibition kicks in nationwide in 1919.
I think it was 1918, 1919, or so that made it easy for the Wrigleys when they took over, because they were also prohibitionists, but they didn't have to worry because prohibition had come in, so they didn't have to worrying about the liquor stores here.
With the exception of all the bootlegging that went on and offloading liquor on the island.
That's a thing. That's a thing.
Okay,
That's
so
the
I'll
thing.
try to make it fast. So this is where the funny part comes in, I think. Anyway, so they became incorporated. So the Banning said, okay, you now take care of utilities. You take care of the water. The water was shipped over by barges in those days in large containers. But they said, you now have to pay for the electricity. You take care of you take care of all the utilities. Well, because we were incorporated, we took it to the voters, and the voters turned it down. And the Banning said, what do you mean you turned it down? They said, we're now a city. We have to take these votes to the people of Avalon. And we turned it down. They said, you can't turn it down. You are now in charge. They said, I'm sorry, but the people of Avalon voted against it. So they had to continue to provide all of the utilities because they owned 80%. They had the hotels, the restaurants, and most of the places where people were living. Even though they were in tents, they still had electricity brought to them. So they said, what do you mean you're not gonna pick it up? And they said, so we had two warehouses, we had two power plants. We had the one here, which was the Island Company, and then up in Falls Canyon, the city put together their own. And then when they finally worked things out, the power plant we have now at Pebbly Beach was built in 1941. That is now the only one that we have. But I just find that funny of saying, well, we took it to the people for a vote and they turned it down. No, we don't want to pay for our utilities. So those are just kind of just a little bit of the humor that I don't think anybody knows, but I just found it fascinating.
Very good.
Thank you.
That is funny.
Yep.